Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for the response on the last video I did. I know it's a big time for Destiny YouTubers to take a break, considering the way things are. Sadly, I kind of can't afford to stop making content right now. As a result, you'll still see content from me, and you'll also see the start of more variety content once again. Maybe this time I'll be able to return to the pivot into other lore, and I'll be able to do it with a little bit more gumption, success, gusto than last time. I'm not gonna lie, I made some content that I'm really proud of, but I also burned out really hard. I tried to make an entire video talking about the whole history of Dragon Age, and well, yeah, that didn't go well. Not because it didn't get views or because I didn't think that it was great. I still think it's a really good video. The problem is just, I got really tired. I burned out super hard after doing that. So yeah, I'm gonna take a bit more of a measured approach. Now, that being said, expect other content in the months coming up to things, and expect other stuff on my streams. I know there are a bunch of possibilities of things I could be covering. Suggestions below in the comments are very welcome. Today though, we're talking about some of the lore raised by Desert Perpetual, and in particular the epic raid of Desert Perpetual, which surprisingly has quite a bit of extra lore and narrative to it. I wasn't sure what to expect, but yeah, there is actually new narrative within the epic raid. So that's kind of cool. However, we're not starting with the main thrust of it all, the new encounter and the time-lost Koragos fight. It's all spectacular, that's for certain, as is the area in which that fight takes place. However, I wanted to cover that in a video where I talk about all of the bosses and see what's going on and get a better understanding of things by running through it with a more scientific mind than my own. Because my janky understanding of physics is, yeah, I see the term chronon and I think I know what that means, and I imagine I'm wrong. So yeah, today instead we're going to focus on something a little bit more crucial to the narrative of the raid in a wider sense, which is Maya losing control of her Vex of the Nessian Schism in a manner that is really quite dramatic. Despite her shenanigans where she's been able to peer through Vex portals in the sky and observe our ongoing battles, Maya Sundaresh's power is in fact starting to diminish. We can tell this thanks to a bunch of dialogue throughout the game, but also thanks to a bunch of lore. I talked in a video previously about a few of these instances, but today I want to go over a few more specific ones that come from the epic Desert Perpetual raid, and it shows the pure degree of how much control Maya is actually losing. Although I think there's really two sides to this story, because as Maya continues in every moment to lose control, the Vex begin to gain independence, and that's also a really fascinating side to this. Also, I saw something mentioned that I wanted to touch on briefly regarding the nature of the independent Vex, and I wanted to push back on it somewhat. Some people saw the independence of the Vex, and in particular the newly dripped out members within Tharsis Reformation, as a bad thing, because it helps to shatter the enigmatic nature of the Vex. There's also a sense that it doesn't fit with what Destiny is. Now I'll admit, it's a radical change for sure, but aside from that, I want to wholeheartedly disagree with that notion. Yes, the Vex have definitely been more mysterious than other factions, but the point of that mystery existing is lost if it doesn't add anything to the game generally. Things being mysterious for the sake of being mysterious is all fine and dandy, but it's not virtuous by default. Yes, it can lead to questions about the faction, and that mystery might be good, but if the topic is so hard to understand in the first place that most people's opinion of the faction hasn't changed and deepened inside of a decade, I see that as more of an issue. It means the Vex are boring. And I hate to say that because conceptually, they're terrifying. I absolutely see that there's a tonal shift within these Vex, but I also see that tonal shift as more of a necessary thing if we ever want the Vex to be relevant again in some meaningful way. I've covered it a bunch before, so I think my thoughts on this are well established, but yeah, at the moment the Vex only become an interesting faction when viewed through the eyes of those they kill. They themselves are honestly kind of boring because when you've seen the surface level lore of everything that's going on with them, and see how deep that can go, there isn't anything that broadens it, it's just what the Vex are. They are a static pillar of the universe in a way that most other factions aren't. The Hive are dynamic and evolving, and they have leaders, actual characters, with goals and individuality that lead them in those new directions. The Vex don't. or at least they didn't. The Echo giving certain Vex individuality means we can finally see heroes and villains arise within this faction. Heroes and villains that have agendas and desires and meaning. The main Vex collective is still a horrifying answer to the Fermi paradox and is still out there, so the conceptual horror beyond imagining for those without paracausal abilities still exists. But now there's individual characters out there as well, characters that we haven't yet met but inevitably will. And those characters give us the chance for stakes that make everything more interesting. Anyway, that's a small side tangent, but I figured it was worth mentioning. No, I don't think that the Vex getting more individuality or even getting a little bit of drip is a problem. Returning to the point at hand, though, that independence has been manifesting within the Vex from the moment that Maya used her Echo to kill 3. Ever since that moment, it was sundered and was a major break in Maya's authority. For starters, she hasn't been able to use all the functions of her Echo in the same manner. This is particularly evident as we learned that she can no longer easily commune and communicate with the presence within it, Tekal, the Kugu commander. In some lore, she's also noted as knowing that she is quite literally being weighed down by the Echo, represented by that collar on her neck. We can see this best in the lore of the new raid shotgun from Epic Desert Perpetual, Starscape Null. It tells us of a moment where Maya is fleeing after the defeat of the Choral Vex in Desert Perpetual. With simulations crashing around her, she reveals the true extent of her weakness. Entropy's lesson. One day, we'll all be still. Threads of simulation break as she runs. She has no lungs to burn, no muscle fiber to feel the strain. Her flight is swift as thought, as command. The mantle rests heavily on the back of her neck. Buzzing, incomprehensible. Understanding Tekal now is like reading Morse code into the flickering of a dying light bulb. Asphalt, sorghum, water, glass, flashing below her as she runs. A new world with every step. 7 league boots carrying her away from... not her failure. Nothing but a setback. The Echo failed her. Tekal's advice and will failed her. They couldn't. She is perfected, stripped down to unblemished essence. If she failed, it was in overestimating her tools. It will not happen again. A twitch of her fingers tells her where her nearest tools are. She turns toward them, pacing over stone inlaid with brass. 13 hobgoblins sing without mouths. Their leader is a miniature harpy, encouraging their work with the high, clean tones of an oracle. They've constructed a theater, seats rising in elegant arcs around them. There is no audience, none but her. A false note. A hobgoblin breaks out of position and pushes another in punishment, hand to glass. Without warning, the group breaks into a brawl, a sort of cheerful surprise in their postures. One novel experience as good as another. They've lost discipline. Her tools have ruined themselves. She will need new ones. Her spine aches. She tears open a passage through the network and is gone. I don't know about you guys, but I love the image of the Vex discovering individual failure and success in a community with that performance within the makeshift theater. It makes them seem full of energy that's almost childlike, and yet it's also clear that these are intelligent individuals who are expressing themselves in a sophisticated manner. I don't mean that culturally, by the way. I mean that in the most objective and scientific sense that I can. Culturally, yes, it is sophisticated to be at a theater, I suppose. But scientifically, think about everything that's going on. Like, objectively, there's a lot of complex moving parts to what we've just seen. The idea of them being able to create and appreciate a theatrical piece of music and be led by a conductor of sorts, which, again, is incredibly ironic here because that's literally Maya's role being taken away by the independence of the Vex. Yeah, you're now seeing them express a whole bunch of things that means that they have a lot of intelligent stuff going on. They have the ability to create and appreciate theatrical music pieces. It means they're also synthesizing sounds which they can then perceive. They have natural vocal ranges according to certain units by the looks of things, can detect harmonies and discord between themselves, and can even follow direction and coordinate as individuals. Heck, it even means they have a degree of taste and can determine what is and isn't correct. The empty theater might imply that they're just practicing for an audience as well, which might wish to gather and hear their creation. This gives us the idea that we can contemplate whether the Vex of this new, independent group can express pride and satisfaction with their attainment. There are a dozen other faculties that all this represents, but the way the Vex react is immature, even playful in their preceding violence. Independence for the Vex is a marvel to behold, and it's incredible because ultimately I think it's like what any of us have discovered. Do you remember the first time you ever did a hobby that's your favorite thing? It may have been a little bit clumsy at first, but there's a slow and subtle and steady joy to that thing, isn't there? And the Vex are expressing all of that all at once. And Maya hates every bit of it with a passion thanks to all of its perceived wastefulness in her perspective. This on its own would be a really revealing moment for the Vex, but as it turns out, Desert Perpetual gives us another lore tab, which is actually a gift unto itself. The Ever-Present, an epic raid weapon lore tab that once again is new and, well, guess what? We get the perspective of the Vex themselves this time. Critically, it tells us the way in which these Vex have been unbound from Maya's chorus and how now they're pushing against the boundaries of their newfound existence. Their search in particular leads them to one critical desire. They don't want to be alone. The lore reads as follows. Directive. Modified. Choral. Explore. Assess. Unbind. I am. I am whole, and I am small, and I am alone. We were. We knew unity was eternal. But this is not so. False premise, false conclusion. Molecular bonds broken on contact with new reagent. What can be relied upon? Old tests must be repeated. New tests must be devised. I do not know the properties of I. I am feeling. I'm feeling exhilaration and loneliness and excitement. Old directives no longer fit the shape of my mind. Their empty places ache. What directives can be completed with 2 hands and 1.25 gallons of radiolaria? Almost none. How can I get more hands? I am alone in my body. Do I have to be alone outside it? I. You. We. I am. You are. Right there. Whole and alone, like me. Do you want to be alone together? I will show you. We can be we. The mention of old tests being repeated here also leads to an interesting possibility. The Vex in this instance might have been part of the small subdivision of Vex found within Desert Perpetual's epic raid, the same subdivision that was responsible for repeating the tests of Agraios, Epoptes, and Iatros. Most crucially, there is a further overarching conclusion that can be assessed from here, which is simply that the Vex who have gained independence are desperately trying to group together. It also brings us to a strange question of how the Vex view consciousness when they are, well, what they are. After all, when we think of a Vex, it's likely that each of us thinks of the individual goblin or harpy or minotaur, but the reality is that the Vex are a lot more complicated than that. Real Vex are the radiolaria within each of the Vex frames, that white liquid that you see at the center of them that you shoot as a crit spot. So, is each Vex frame now separated from the network? Is each of them a nation unto themselves? I don't know about you guys, but this reminds me a bit of Legion from Mass Effect. When you look at Legion, it looks like a single Geth frame, but the platform, or hardware as they referred to it, was simply a host for the 1,183 programs that made up Legion itself. Until the very end, it wasn't actually an individual. It was 1,183 individual programs working in consensus. When it was networked in with a larger group of Geth, it was also coordinating with those Geth in a wider grouping, and could occupy and influence other programs. In Mass Effect's lore, this is such a foundational idea that the Geth weren't called a swarm or an army, they were called a consensus. I now wonder whether the same thing is happening here with the Vex. Maybe the only difference is the fact that they have the ability to be distinct within their own frames, as opposed to all being connected to a wider collective. It becomes an even more pressing and interesting question when you remember that the Radiolaria, according to Maya, are individual units of consciousness, rather than simply blood or cells. She notes that they are the smallest individual units of consciousness. So maybe it is accurate to say that these personalities that the individual Vex are forming are actually millions of minds unto themselves, separated off from the Vex network, left in a smaller, more lonely capacity, forced to find others that they ally with. Is this realistically swarms seeking other swarms? Trying to find commonality across all of their lives? I'm not sure. Time will tell exactly how all of this functions, but for now it raises fascinating questions about the nature of the new Vex communities that have gained independence. Maybe it's not too long before we have the Vex asking, does this unit have a soul? For what it's worth, with some of them creating art, striving to collaborate to create theatrical performances, or even just reaching out to each other to make the solitude less lonely. I think that they might soon instead state that yes, they do have souls. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. As I said at the beginning, if you have any thoughts about what you want me to cover in other videos, please go ahead and leave it down below in the comments section. There will be more lore on the Epic Raid. I just want to go ahead and take time to actually finish this up, and to give you guys the most accurate view possible, because science is hard. Anyway, thank you so much. If you enjoyed it and want more lore from universes near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime my name is Bife. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you Starside.